Okay, welcome to Module 4 on our academic course for the functional consultants. So, what we're looking at in Module 4 is the Dataverse and model driven apps, right? So, what's Dataverse, right? Dataverse is the database, right, that holds all the information that will be rendered on your Dynamics CRM end, right? That's the data source that your Dynamics CRM will be consuming its records from. It's actually a secure, scalable data platform for Power Platform and Dynamics 365. So you build Power Apps. You want to get data, you could point to Dataverse, right? Power Apps gives you extensibility to point to other data source. But for your Dynamics CRM itself, right, where it sits on, it's your Dataverse, right? And as you can see from my image, everything on on that platforms on the Power Platform revolves around it, right? From your Power Apps, it has a way of syncing to take data from Dataverse. Power Automates, Power BI, you can render visualizations also from Dataverse. So your Copilot also can communicate with Dataverse and get those information. So this table is very robust, right? It supports business rules, different data types. So you see that when we're trying to create a table shortly, right? So now, for understanding the different type of tables we have, so let me show you how you could go about, right, the navigating through Dataverse. So basically, they are standard tables. Standard tables are tables that are provided by Microsoft. So let me just spin up our environment and show you some standard tables. So as I told you earlier on, right, you could go through the whenever you want to work on your Dynamics environment, go to make.powerapps.com, navigate to the environment you want, then create a solution that you'll be using to work. So we'll be using this academic solution, right? So there are some default tables that comes with Dataverse. So for this environment now, let me just show you. Let me go to the default solution. So if you see below it this now, if you go to default solution, you'll be able to see all the tables, right, that are sitting on this environment. So as a consultant, so there are some tables you'll be making reference to using and all that. To get details about those tables, you come down here. So when you scroll down to tables here, you can see tables. So I have like there's 106 100 1667 tables on this environment. So when you click down, you will be able to see all the tables. So some of the these are most here are actually Microsoft design tables, right? Some of the popular tables are accounts, right? So let me look for the accounts table for you. AC. Okay, I think that might have been renamed. Let me just search here. Let me do contact, something like this, right? So you could search. That's why you quickly do your search, right? And you could get the tables you're looking for. Let me just do cases also. Case is also one. So you can see this is a table. So each of all these things you are seeing here are actually tables, right? So that's basically how you get access to tables. So those are standard tables. Then tables you create by yourself are called custom tables, right? So let me go back to our solution now, the academic solution, and you can see table. So in your solution now, you could add existing tables, which are the tables that were created by Microsoft on the Dataverse environment for that on the Dataverse for that environment, or you could create new ones as the case may be based on what the use case scenario for the implementation you are doing covers, right? So how you add maybe already existing tables is you come to this existing and just click on tables here, and I could add tables. So let's say I want to add, let's say, the contacts table. Okay, it's called some, let me see, individual. Okay, Since we've renamed it on this environment, so let me look for it. Okay, but one quick one we'll just add is the case table. So you could see this is the case. So to add an existing, you just click on the add here. Then it takes you next. It asks you if you are including all the objects and or you want to just only take the table metadata, right? So for this, I'll just include everything, right? Include all the objects, and I can click on add, and voila, it's going to add that table for us, right? And under here now, you see the number of tables is now 1. So how do you go about creating custom tables? So let's say the table you want now, you need to create it yourself, right? And usually the idea of creating tables, if you want to cluster data and interrelate them, right? So let's say we want to create one table and we'll call it, we'll click on new here, click on this and click on table. Then we'll give it a name. So let's say I call this, I'll just click on start from blank and I'm going to give it a name. So the name I'll be giving it is Academy Table 1, right? So I'll just click on enter and that's all. I could click on save and exit at the top right here. So save and exit. So when I come to when we come to our table here now, right, it's going to increase our table count for the one we created. So let me just refresh this so that we could see that. So you can see we've created our table. This is now academic table 1. Let me add one more table, right? So I could just click on this, click on tables, then click on blanks, and just call this academy table 2, right? And I can click on enter, save and exit, save and close. So that's basically how you quickly create tables. So now the next thing is the columns in each of your table, which are referred to as fields, right, is what now makes up the attributes of that table. So let's say your table will have a name, maybe date, all those things, depending on how you want to create that entity. So tables and entities mean the same thing in dynamic CRM, customer engagement. So these are all the various entities we've created. We've created table 1, table 2. So this is how you create custom, and this is how we get the out of the box tables on the system. So some tables are actually activity tables, meaning they could track interactions like phone calls, emails, and cases. So you could see that in the likes of case entity. You could actually make a table an activity table, meaning it can be called in the activity timeline. So what I mean by that, if I go to our environment here, right? So let's say I go on this, you can see now this case is actually a table. That's why I said every single thing here, right, points to a table. You could see all these ones with these icons, they're actually custom tables. So let's say I click on this, one of this record here, you'll see something called the timeline here. This is the timeline. And if you click on this add, you can see each of all these things are actually tables. We have email, phone call, tax, all these are tables, right? But now they are activity tables, meaning they can be called, their records can be called up on an activity. That's basically what an activity table is. And you could actually convert your table to become an activity table. I'll show that in a later video. So also let's now dive deep into how we could quickly access different things on custom tables. So when I click on this, you could see this gives, if you click on columns, it will bring out the list of columns, right, that are already on this table. So all this, by default, when you create a custom table, right, the Dynamics Dataverse adds some default columns to them, right? Things like created by, the dates, created on, import sequence. So all these are defaults, right? You can now add new column at the top here, right, on the table. Then you have relationships. So relationships now are the other tables that this table is related to, meaning okay, there's a one to many, there's a one to one, or there's a many to many relationship, as the case may be. So all this shows you how the relationship spans out across this table and others. So at the point of creating a custom table, there are some tables also that are being referenced, maybe like the user table that will hold the user that created that record in that table. So all those things, you can see all that here. Then we have keys, right, which is the specific uh, column that you want to make a unique key, right? Meaning you could reference them at a given point in time in your operations. Then we have forms. We'll be coming down to this. So forms are basically the display in which users will see and the information they can pass in, right? So something like this is what we refer to as a form. So like let's click on new, so you can see this is a form, right? And each of these informations you are seeing here are what are called the columns. You can see things like case title, case number, customer contact. If you come here also, if you go to case and you come to columns, you see all those things here, right? You see it, case age, case category, subcategory, case number. Those are basically things you are seeing here. So depending on what you want to capture in different forms, right, you have the options of doing that. So this the system is really robust, and the functionality is great, right? So the next things you have views. So views are just the interface you use to see records that are already pulled out. So for instance, now if I click on case here, right, if you see this is actually what we call a view, and you could navigate through different views, right? It just filters out records based on different conditions you've given, and people could easily just access those records. For instance, now you're seeing my active cases. So there's a filter that is done on this such that it's cases that only belongs to this account, right, that are captured here, that will pull out here. You could navigate and change between different views, right? You could come to something like all cases, so it pulls out all the cases on the system. And this is where also you can add and create additional view for that table, right, that you are working on. Then you have different charts that you could have for that table. You could also design different dashboards for the table, and also your business rule, right, doing logics, right, that the system will be able to use. So we'll get to how to be able to do that once we create some columns and all that. So let's proceed from there. So next now is designing model-driven apps. So the apps you see on the environment end, right? Basically, those apps are the uh, model-driven apps, and they are model-driven apps because basically you don't have a say over the UI of those applications, right? You can only just drag and put things in sections, which I will show us shortly. But for the Canvas app, you have like more artistic say over the design UI. So let's now walk back and see how model-driven apps are created. So if you want to create a model-driven app, right, you come to your apps, still under the same solution, right? You can see the new at the top. I can click on new, click on app here. You can see the two. So there's a canvas and the model. Models are things, all these apps here, you can see they are model driven apps, and they all have one interaction format, right? In which you see the entities by your left, then you now have views, and through those views, you can access the forms. That's basically how you could go through into a how the layout of model driven app comes out to do. No matter the model driven apps you create, you put your tables here, and you have your views and on those clusters. So let's come down here and let's create a model driven app. So let's create, just click on model driven app, and we're going to call this Academy app, right? So we just click on create. So this is going to create a model driven app for us on this environment. So what are we doing is, once the app is created, I'm going to launch it. Then so so basically what we'll just do is I will play this so that you could see. Let me just publish. Okay, so we don't have actually any sub area. I wanted to just play and show you how it will look empty. But let's add now the two tables we created, right? Let's add the two tables we created. So what we'll do is we'll click on new, or click on add page here. Then it tells us what we want to add. We actually want to add a data vars table. So you could add a data vars table, you could add a dashboard or a custom page, web resource, or navigation link as the case may be. So we're adding a data vars table. So the table we want to add is those are our custom table. So we want to, or let's add all the three tables we put on our solution. We'll put Academy 1 and 2. We'll click on add. So you can see now Academy 1 and 2 are now inside, right? Look at them now, they're not here. I could rename this here. Just click on this to rename. I could call this Academy Records, something like this. And I could click on save. Then so the next thing is to make all this you've done visible on your app interface here, right? We'll just save and publish. So let's publish this. So we're done publishing. So you can see at the top right here, it's publishing. So it's done publishing. Then now let's come back to our application here and refresh. So if you click on this now, let's refresh this. Okay, our app is not yet visible on the platform. So what we'll do now is, okay, let's cancel this. Let's be sure that our app has published. Okay, good. Our app is done publishing. So let's just go back to our solution and turn on the application. All right. Okay, this is our application. So click on this. Let's see if it's turned on. So our application is on. So now we just go back to our environment and review it. So when you're not done creating your app, right? So you just click on play here. And when we click on play, we will now see our app, right? So good. So this is how a model-driven app comes out. So basically, just the way you have from all the other default apps that comes with the environment, right? For all the default apps that comes with the environment, this is how you see all the apps, right? And this is the one we just created. So let me cancel this. You could also come from here when you click on this, right? And you click on play. You can see our app that we just created. So when you click on this, it opens up. So that's basically how all the apps that you see, right, they are being created, and this gives you details on how to troubleshoot and work on different things. So now for our own app, you could see that everything is as default, right? Table 1, table 2. Okay, so let's say I want to add more to this app, right? I just click on edit. And let's add that case entity we added to our solution here now. So let's say we'll add a new page, a new this, and call this call up case. This one, when you add it, then you can see now it gives you a preview of how it looks like. Then we can save. And once we save and we publish at the top right, then if I come back here after we're done publishing and I refresh this our app, so you can see now cases is now here. If I click on cases too, so all the case records on the system, they will become visible and the default view that we have. So that's basically how we create model-driven apps on the system and make use of them accordingly. So now let's move to forms and views. So we started discussing about this forms and views. So now let's go to the tables we created, right, and see our forms, and then also work on views and quick views and subgrid as the case may be. So now let's go back to our environment, go back to our solution. So we'll go back here and go to our solution. We are working on the academic solution. So just click on this. So now this is our table. So let's click on table 1. So this is a form, and the form that usually comes up by default is the main form, right? So we click on the main form, but there are different forms and you could ask them to come up at different point in time. When I click on the main form here, it opens up the form. So the way you want it to display, right? The way you want whatever to interact. So all those things you design them here. So as you can see, I could let's say I want to split this into 2 columns, right? If I put this cursor here, I just come down to the layout, split it into 2, right? So this now is section, this is now that section. So I could now drag things and put them on my form. So let's say this is how you do the form design. So I bring all these things here. So let's say I want all these things. And let's say there are some informations I also want to still pass here, right? That are not here. Let's say I want to rename this. I could just click on that and come here to rename this label. So I could rename it to Academy 1 ID, something like that, right? So let's say this Academy 1 captures students' information. So let's just start adding columns. You can add columns already from here. Call this, let's say, students name, right? And now these are now our various data types that we have. We have text, numbers, date and time, lookup, choice, currency, and phone stuff. So I'll just click on text. Also on that text, you have quite an extensive one. You have emails. So this one will ensure that what you're putting is an email and all that. So I'll just click on this and leave it as default. And you can see that it will appear here. Let me now add email. Let me call this student email, right? And I'll click on single text and I'll call this email. And I'll click on save. And I'll add a new one. I'll call this students phone number, and I'll call this phone number, and I'll click on save, right? So now these things we've imputed, right? We want to pick them and put them under this section. So I can call this section student details, something like this. So now I can put student name first, then put student email, then I'll put student phone number. So basically, I'm done with creating my form. So these are how you could go about um, working on forms, right, to suit what your business use case are. So when I'm done that way, I could just save and publish. So once we are done saving and publishing, the next thing is, if you want to check this out, you could just go back. Let's go back here, click on, okay, we are already on it. So let's go to table 1. And if you click on new here, you can see that it's those informations that it will be asking you to pass in. So let's say the ID is ACAD 001, and all these are system generated. That's why they are locked. So the system will generate all that. So let's say I now come here, student name is Victor. Good share. And the email of the person is Victor at Victor Oguche at gmail.com, and the phone number is 0816 So when you're done this, you could just save and close. So when we go to our view, you can see that this is now the view, right? You can see this record we've created. So let me create another one. Let me just call this a card 002 and call this person Peter James, something like this. And I can say his email is peterjames@gmail.com, and the person's phone number is 081. Yep, something like this. And just go save and close. So basically, you will now be seeing this is how the records will now be viewed. So that's basically how you do your form design in CRM. So the next thing is we want to work on views, just like we are seeing here. So we don't want to just see only this new column and other things here. We want to see some more informations that are quick for us to make decision on which record we want to open. So what you do is come down to your table, you come to views, then you can see the default public view, this one. So I'll just click on it, and you can see that it's the one housing the column name, right? So I could now come here and let's say I want to add things like the person's name, student name. I want to add his email. I want to add his phone number. And let's say I want to move this one till the end. I can drag it this way and drop it at the end. Drag this one first, and drag this one here, drag this one. So whichever way you want to drag them, you could drag them, and that's how. So I could just hit on save and publish. So when I hit on save and publish, then when you come down here and you refresh, so that's basically, you would then see down that our view has changed. You can see this now. So that's basically how you update view. So depending on the customer use case, some customers might have different use case, right? That you might need to tweak the views, right, to do some of the stuff. So this is basically how you be able to work on view. And lastly, there's also something called subgrids, right, that you could add on your form. Maybe you want to have like a list from another point. So there's a whole lot of functionalities you could do with your form, right? Let me just go back here. You will see that under what we call components. So if you click on components now, you have different components that you could use. You could partition these things into columns, right? You have the column sections here. You have your quick view. You have your subgrid. So you want to have like a list relationship from another table. You have all those here, and you have the option of changing layouts, putting grids, displays. Maybe you want to put some HTML image and all those things. So you have a long list of things you could do here. So these are, but basically how you explore those things, you just drag and drop them, right? Pass in the necessary information and save and publish. So that's basically how your interactions with the forms will look like, and you passing in those information. So it's usually based on your use case, right? Based on how what the client wants. Then even if it's from an existing table, you could also go in and then do the tweak. So let's say they want more information to be captured here. You create those columns, then pass them in, and the customer will be able to capture them when they are creating their case accordingly. So let's now move to our next. So last we'll be looking at here is applying logics to hide and show fields and condition with no code. So basically for the logics, right? So let's go back to our table, this table. So we have something called business rules. So this is the business rule. So let's say, for instance, now for your form, right? You want to say that if the person's name is empty, then the field for email and phone number should be hidden. Let's say that's our own logic. So until you put a name, email and phone number should be hidden. or maybe only email, as the case may be. So let's show us how those kind of conditions that your use case may be, you might want to do. So when you click on business rule for that entity, so I'll just click on new business rule. So now this is where we create our business rules, right? And you can see, let's just call this name conditioning, something like this, conditioning, right? So this would be our take on that. So let's say for this one now, right, we'll now set our condition. So what you just do is there will be a display name for the condition. So let me just call this check name has value, something like this. Then what I'm looking at is that student name, right? And I'll say it contains data. So like this. If it contains data, let me apply. So now if it contains data, what should I do, right? I will now click on this and add some conditions to it. So I'll just click here and I'll add some conditions. So let's say I add this, or let me set visibility. So if it contains data, let's make it, okay, let's hide first. So what we want to do is hide, let's just hide only email, and let's change this to if it does not contain data, you hide the email, right? And the next check we want to do is add a condition to this that now checks if it contains data, it should show email. So let's do the same thing to student name and say if it contains data, apply. The next thing we should do there is we want to set visibility. Click on this, and the visibility we are setting is email should be yes. So you can see set email visibility. Click on apply. Click here, set email visibility. Change this to no. So if there's no name, then you should set it to no. If there's name, you should set it to yes. So let me click on this. So basically you can read that, you can now see it's more here, right? You could be able to see the conditions that are being set here. Contains data, hide field, student name. Contains, the first one is if it doesn't contains data. So let's put apply. If it doesn't contain data, hide field email. If it contains data, show field email. So we are basically done. That's basically what we wanted to achieve. So I could just click on save here. It's saving this. Then the next is to activate it. So it's going to also validate in that process. Once we're done activating the process, so let's just go back to our form and try creating and see how the operation kicks in, right? So let's go back here, come to this. So when I click on new, you can see now that our email has disappeared, right? Because of our stuff has kicked in. So let's say I put in name and I click on enter. So once I put in name, this will appear, but once I close this, it will disappear. So that's basically one of the cool stuff that we have. So let me say I call this Kate's hands, right? I click on this. So now it will ask me to put an email. I put on kate@gmail.com and I put in a phone number, right? So that's basically how you design business. Okay, let's call this a card 003. So that's basically how you design your business process rules and how they function. So you have a lot list of things you could do here. So depending on the customer use case. So that's basically the run through of Dataverse, right? The whole Dataverse system, your tables, forms, and views, how you could go about tweaking them, then also the different experience you have, how you provision them on your app, how those apps become visible. So the next we'll be looking at in our next module is automating business processes with Power Automate. So see you in our next module.